Everybody, welcome. Those who will watch this later too, welcome. Professor James Moore. Please, the little I know about you is that you're Pan-African scholar.
I'm an African,
okay,
born in an African village in the United States of America, in a state called South Carolina.
Okay.
People come from all over West Africa and Central Africa. They're Mendi people, mostly my grandmother people. Some of my people are from Ghana, Cameroon, Nigeria. I've spent, of course, most of my 40 years traveling to Africa in Ghana. Ghana just has a special place in my heart. So people can kind of know who I am. I'm married to the same lady 50 years. We have 8 children. We have 23 grandchildren. We're all Pan-Africanists. That is not allowed to be anything else in this family. They range from school teachers to doctors to counselors to music executive, but they must stay on the African course. Our life is about African liberation, from the cradle to the grave. But also, so they have some note on my background. I attended initially Savannah State College, a black college in Georgia, in '64. And because of the civil rights movement, I got kicked out of that school. I joined the American military, and I served the military until I refused to fight in Vietnam because I didn't feel we had an issue as Africans against the Asian people. I took my court-martial. I won. I have an honorable discharge. Upon the death of Malcolm X, and I know many people have heard of him.
Yes.
I'm the person that assumed the leadership of his mosque. Then I was at Hajj Amin Shahid. I've, of course, been to Mecca twice back in the 70s. So after Malcolm's death, I took over the mosque. His sister took over the OAAU, and I was its international vice president during that period. Of course, I worked with the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army, other forces, as well as SWAPO, as well, and in Namibia and Angola and Mozambique, because that's what our life was. Somewhere in all of that, I got married, went to college, and produced children, and started traveling to Ghana. And there was 2 people in Ghana, really 4 people in Ghana I've got to mention because they formed my African consciousness. The man who took me there, Dr. Professor Leonard Jeffries, who I consider to be one of the greatest African scholars in the world. The man who took me to meet, Nana Sapong, the Agogohene.
Agogohene, Sapong.
Yes, who will be celebrating his 45th year on the stool in March. So I will be in Ghana in March, come rain, shower, or whatever. Even if they bring me on a stretcher, I will be there to celebrate with Nana.
Yeah.
Then there was a man, sometimes he was rough in the country. He was Bafo Okotu.
Bafo Okotu.
Linguist to Santahini, the vocal warrior, who was like an uncle to me. Santahini took very good care of me and Dr. Jeffries. We were family. Even the Santahini's present, his mom was like my auntie.
Okay.
And the priest who taught me a lot of what I know, and she was Nana Afuasa Afriye. At that time, she was the chief fetish priest for Santahini and the Santahini before. And she lived to be more than 100 before she fell and bumped her head and had to go home. So the other man who have guided me well is Nana Kwabena Nketsia V of Esokado. That's my little brother and my king. So I spent a lot of time working in Ghana through the years. I'll stay away from my political close friends because that can get you.
It's an election year.
I did get to meet the current president when he was running the first time and he lost. He ran his campaign out of my hotel in Cape Coast because
Who's that?
Our current president, Akufo-Addo.
Okay, Nana Addo. Okay.
Yeah, and I met Nana. We spent the whole evening along with my godfather, who passed, who sold me the Sana Lodge in Cape Coast. So me and my group, we owned the Sana Lodge Hotel, Cape Coast.
Okay, what's the name of the hotel? What's the name of the hotel?
Sana Lodge.
Okay.
Even we're going through financial crisis now, but we'll come out of it by the time this pandemic resides somewhat. So Ghana has been a model in many, many ways for the rest of Africa.
Okay.
Kwame Nkrumah, though we may have problem with some members now and others, but even those who criticize him is using much of his methods. Like leader, you make mistakes, and he made some, but he brought us a lot of critically good ideas on how to establish the state. I would give him one criticism, that he didn't lean close enough to the indigenous culture as the ideology of state. And maybe he should have married an Ashanti woman instead of an Egyptian woman. And a lot of the problems wouldn't have happened, I understood why he did it. He was trying to unite the North and the rest of Africa. And Abdul Nasser was certainly a revolutionary. And Abdul Nasser was a Nubian and not an Arab. So I understood what he was trying to do. But maybe Bafo Kotu wouldn't have gone so hard against him and end up in prison, if he had married an Ashanti woman.
Yeah, that would have been, it's true. It's true. Rollins married an Ashanti woman. So
yeah. And Rollins, while we are on the air, since I would like to tell the former presidents, all of us in North America sent our regards and sympathy for the loss of his beautiful mother, and we knew that how close he was to his mom. We did get to see some of the funeral on the internet over here.
Okay. Yes. So, that was just about a week, I think, within the last week.
Last Friday.
Yes.
So to my brother, who know me well, and I know him well.
Wow.
Our hearts and spirits are with you and Nana, and all will be well. The ancestors are now in charge, and she'll finish their journey, and she'll be in her village waiting for you one day, waiting for me one day to come,
Wow.
So,
Professor, I when I was in school at Kwame Nkrumah University, as an engineering student, I remember there was this group, Black engineers. I was a typical Ghanaian, was interested in studying and going, being involved in religious activities as well. I didn't pay much interest in Black engineers. I just wanted to pass the exam. Then later, after school, I saw that those people who paid attention had better understanding of history, particularly with engineers and what they contributed to the engineering discipline, the history of it. Because the main course was very silent on the contribution of Africa or Africans.
Yeah.
And it's not only in engineering, it's almost everywhere. So a typical engineer or a typical Ghanaian graduate, I remember in junior secondary school, but I could not link it to my development. I saw it as, just go to school, learn something, pass. But later, when I traveled and was doing second degree, then I saw how much I didn't know, even in terms of Africa, and in terms of Ghana, in terms of what I had to know to stand with, and be able to come out as somebody who knew something beyond what the Europeans knew about Africa. So then I started to show interest in history. So what I want you to lecture us is, why is African history important, and why is it not so much openly added to a lot of the education all across Africa?
Let me read something to you that was written by Nana Kwabena Nketia, and this is an extraordinary book. The title of the book is African Culture in governance and development. Is
African culture in governance and development.
Ananakwabin Ketsia the fifth of Esukado.
Okay.
800 pages that will make you not set this book down. And of course, I wrote the foreword to the book for my brother.
Okay.
So I want to read a passage that he has here in the book. It says, the situation where in an African university, African philosophy and African arts and culture are studied in the ghetto of an African studies program, while European philosophy and European-style arts and culture reign in the philosophy and arts department. Imagine an African university where only European languages are taught in the department of modern languages, as if the African language that are being spoken in town and on campus are not modern language too. Imagine an African university where the departments of anthropology, sociology, economics, political science, etc., are devoted exclusively to the European version of these disciplines. Imagine an African university where the humanities taught are the European humanities, where the dominant literature taught is European literature, but with some of its African imitation tagged on. Imagine an African university where African medicine and African agriculture are not part of what is taught in the Department of Medicine and Agriculture. Imagine an African university whose journalism school is a bastion of American journalism doctrines and whose education department is inculcating American educational philosophies and techniques, such as a university does not qualify, or such a university does not qualify as an African university. It is merely an outpost in Africa of an American and European academy perpetuating its colonial and imperialist ideals. And so that's where we have to start. And I wrote a little piece that I like to tell people. Ancestors are your pedigree. You learn your pedigree from your history. If people define themselves by referring to their origin, we are the best of our ancestors' genes. We are the latest version of our ancestors. We are the highest tech version of our ancestors. Our children are the best of our ancestors' genes, the latest version and the highest tech model. When we understand that, then we'll start saying, when we are studying other people's guidance and philosophies and religion, we are worshiping the ancestors of our murderers, the ancestors who committed genocide against us, the ancestors who trampled our culture, burnt our village, stole our natural resources, enslaved our people, and colonized our people. Those are the ancestors we are trying to emulate and imitate. Then for God's sake, we're going to do those same things to one another. And we're doing it all over the continent, all over America. So we have to be very clear when we talk about African culture, because culture is the centerpiece. The world of traditional African society is a totality, and I wrote this one, a whole. Its foundation is nothing other than the material conditions within which the people create and recreate their lives. For me to think of a turtle, let's take a turtle. The turtle, if you take him and confuse him and put him in a cage with rabbits all of his life, will study only rabbit philosophy, rabbit heritage. But the turtle will never be a rabbit, no matter how much he imitates the rabbit. And thus the Africans have to deal with history. We have to start with the invasion of our continent. We didn't invade anybody. We didn't go and take their people and enslave them in our lands. We didn't take their natural resources from them. We shared our civilizations with them. I don't care what history book you read, you will not find an occasion of a civilization in Europe. The closest thing they've got is Greece. And nearly everything in Greece is borrowed from Northeast Africa. So they steal Egypt so that we won't see the theft. But Egypt is as black now as it was then in terms of its creation. The people who sit there are Arab cousins. They're invaders. They're Arabs, Turks, Greeks, Roman, Eastern Europeans. They're not African. They did not build that civilization. And one in Ghana don't have to go very far. If you go to Ga, the Ga Adangbe community, the Ga community, you will see the pirates on their fishing boat. You will see the god of Egypt, Khepra, on their fishing boat. They will talk about the Nubian, out of which they came in their journey to the west. So you don't have to go far to see that we built Egypt and we owned it. We got driven out by the Muslims and the Turks and the Arabs and the Greeks and the Romans. But it doesn't change history. So when you go into the museums, and it's always funny, I go to Egypt all the time. All of the mummies are black. So how do you look at all these black faces and say this is not a black civilization? If the leaders are black, then the people are black. So I went there to come to where we have to come.
Okay.
We have been under attack for centuries. You've got to count the Greek attack, the Roman attack, the Persian attack, the Hittites attack, the Hyksos attack, all in the BC. We fought most of them off. But by the time we get into AD with the Romans, and then the children of the Greeks, who we call the Arabs, and their newfound religion called Islam, we were in for trouble.
Yeah.
And we are still in for big trouble because of that. If one does not know the history, one would not know that it was the Muslims coming out of the Ottoman Empire that was running a slave trade system in Africa for 1,500 years before the transatlantic slave trade.
1,500 years.
1,500 years. The trans-Saharan slave trade, the trans-Indian Ocean slave trade is in the hands of the Turks and the Arab Muslims. They devastated Africa even before the European Christian got there. When the European Christian came, he simply tapped into a system that was already in place for 1,500 years. You understand me? People like say, oh, your own people sold you. Maybe we had, and we know we had some corrupt people, but they were minimal. Nobody tells the story. You want to talk about, like they say, the Ashantis was involved in the slave trade. So my cousin John was a drug dealer. Did that make my family the drug dealers? You know?
No.
So
you know what you just said.
When they say that about the Ashantis, which is a very young kingdom in time, but when the Ashanti kingdom came into being, the transatlantic slave trade was just about over. And so they don't even talk about the great Bansu, Asantehene Bansu, who marched down to the coast, decimated the white man, took the Elmina slave dungeon from them, and threw them in the ocean. So tell that story. Tell all of the stories of the wars we fought, not to let our people be taken away. But if you don't know that history, then you make false assumptions on relationships. So we must study the history. We must study the history to understand the many wars. If you go into northern Ghana, there are houses up in the areas near Paga, where the only opening is on the roof. And they only have slits in the wall to shoot their bow and arrows. The house was designed to defend themselves against the foreign slave traders. The door to the compound was only 2 feet high. You had to crawl to get into the courtyard. So if you were the enemy, I could take your head. So when you see a people leave that you can go and visit now, and you see a people leave that, then you see the legacy of how they fought against slavery. You can go to Seliga. Yes, Seliga was the biggest market, okay? But at the same time, all around Seliga, we fought great wars to free our people. That's just one occasion. So history will erase the white man's mystery and let us learn the truth about
history will liberate the white man's mystery.
Mystery, yes. history will erase the white man's mystery.
Wow.
When we think, when we pour libation, and I remember Bafo was so strong when he was the linguist for Santa Hene. Once the libation had been poured, it was at a fair at the stadium. I don't know whether it was the day. I was there once to see the golden stool come out, which is one of the most magnificent occasions on the planet Earth. People there's nothing like that, But on this day, the Bafo had already poured libation. So when the president was a little bit late because of traffic, and someone suggests, maybe we have to pour libation for the president, Bafo said, libation is done. The law says it's done here at this time in this way. The president can take his seat. I mean, and the president did not feel offended because he knew culture reigned.
Which president was that?
My good brother Jerry, who I
love.
Yes,
thank you.
One of our great presidents. And one day, I know there've always been rifts between folks, but one day history would tell us that despite some of the injuries that comes with all wars or political takeover, people will die and some will be unjust and some will be just. But you've got to know who put you back on the path. And I believe that man put us back on the path, and that's why Ghana is where she is today, ahead of the clan in all of Africa right now. No matter what nobody say, no one can compete with the stability, with the educational rising of Ghana. And if it wasn't for the World Bank and International Monetary Fund and the American forcing us to submit to their valuation of our currency, we'd be one of the most economically solvent country in Africa right now. So
can you break that part down for me?
Yeah, let me go back. There was a point when the CD was almost 1-to-1 to the American dollar, only a few decades ago.
Yes.
Now the CD is 5+ something to the American dollar because they came in with their austerity plan and says you will be able to get money from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, but you have to allow them to reconstruct your currency. So now you're going to devalue my currency. Now, I got the gold in my ground. I got the manganese in my ground. I got the bauxite in my ground. I got the diamonds in my ground. I got the oil in my lake. But my currency get devalued. You who have none of this, your currency reigns supreme over me. I'm the only one that got things to back up my currency. And so we have to back away. The young people, the electorate have to tell the politicians, sit down and renegotiate these arrangements. Donald Trump, as evil as that old boy is, he showed you that he can break any treaty he wants. He broke the NAFTA treaty with Canada and said you will renegotiate. He broke the NAFTA treaty with Mexico and said you will renegotiate. He broke the Southeast Asian treaty and said you will renegotiate. So why can't we renegotiate these colonial treaties and arrangements when a gun is being held to our head to sign them? We have more rights and reason, justifiably, to renegotiate every single treaty. Our cocoa treaty, our gold treaty, and for God's sake, that 10% oil treaty, the bauxite treaty, the manganese treaty. How can we have all this wealth and our college students is hawking on the streets selling plastic goods from China? We've got to rearrange this whole thing. We've got to revisit it. I'm not blaming anyone in government. What Britain and what the Western colonial powers have done is use the world banking system, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and the United Nations to cripple us economically no matter how wealthy we are. And they control this by having us still use their filthy, and I call it filthy, colonial curriculums in most of our schools. And so we have to raise the question, if I tell the story of Ghana, who's the bad guy? The invaders and the colonialists, or my indigenous people? So my brothers and sisters who are Christians, and I grew up in a Christian church. My grandpa was a Christian minister. When I became a Muslim leader, I walked away from Islam and Christianity to come back to my indigenous African religion because my grandmother was a fetish priestess, the lady who raised me. We call them root women in the South Carolina, where I come from. So I chose to go back to her path. And that led me back to Ghana, you know. And so what I asked this question: if my enemy and I are worshiping the same God, and my enemy has brought that God to me, who do you think that God's going to serve?
That God is your enemy. That God is your enemy.
There's a story when I first went to Togo, and we were having this discussion, me and an African Monsignor. And I was saying, why do I see all these Catholic things everywhere? And he said, oh, Small, you never look up. I said, no, I ain't looking up. I don't believe in God up in the sky. He said, oh, Small, you never look up. And my mind looked up all around the top part of the house with all the voodoo symbols. Down on the tables was all the Catholic symbols, but up above was all the traditional symbols. I said, oh, I got it. We can play both games if you're smart. So he told me this story. He says, you know, when the white man first came to Togo, they wanted to build this church. So they brought all the men from the village, trying to force them to work to build this great cathedral. And our people would not work. And they just sat and laughed. And so the white man said, oh, look at those lazy Africans. They don't have sense enough to help us build a house for God. The African brother says, oh, what foolish white man to think he can build a house big enough to hold God. So you had two philosophies just in that metaphor. But when you think of it, when you think of what makes sense, it's like the Ewe people use the word, they say Mawi. That's only one name. They also say Sogbelisa, that the divine is the totality of creation itself. Okay, Sogbelisa, that is the basis of African culture. African culture is based on mastering a knowledge of the cosmology and the ecology and the human being's relationship and role in cosmology and ecology. How do we learn the laws of nature and interpret it into our social ecology in terms of our governing characteristics? That's what we call culture. It is people's culture that saved them from genocide, not a gun. Okay? Your mind keeps you from being genocided. When someone takes control, and the British made this very clear, that the only way to conquer the Africans is to destroy their access to their indigenous culture. All right. So once you cut a man off from their mom,
how did they destroy that? How did they do that?
Let me give it just once they come in with the guns, they empower. But they say, oh, Kwabena, you want to go to school? You want to learn science and technology and mathematics? Well, that's fine, but you can't be Kwabena anymore. You got to be John.
Okay.
So you leave Kwabena behind. And they tell me, oh, Kofi, you like to come to our school? Very fine, boy. You can come. But when I get into school, they give me a block of wood. Said if you speak the indigenous language, you hold that wood. But at the end of the day, you get a whipping. But if you hear another one of your brothers speaking your indigenous language, give them the wood. Whoever at the end of the day is caught with that block, that's who we whip for speaking the indigenous language. Those are just some of the tyranny used against our children. But then you say that your educational system is the only one that should reign. And you define my system as being fetish, juju, witchcraft. Okay. How can you say, if you go to Latte and learn the herbal system that was governed over by Nana Paribia, and I know you've heard of Nana Paribia from the Latte area.
Latte, okay.
Yeah. And I also got to know that great woman. She was a masterful. So they come to Ghana now to study our herbs, to study our fauna, to find out what medication we use, bring it back to their university, study what the ingredients and components are, extract that, then sell it back to you as medicine. So if you chew this, that's bad for you. But if you take it, wrap in my chemical sleeve called a capsule, it's good for you. You understand what I'm saying? I'm trying to make it simple, trying to make it plain. The American pharmaceuticals. One year, one of my brothers, who was a priest from Ghana and a Kumfu, studying at Harvard. I went to give a lecture at Harvard. And he said, Small, I want to show you something. He was studying pharmacology. Harvard had sent him to Madagascar to get samples of all the herbs, the leaves, the berry, the fauna, everything they use for healing, everything they use for cure. Talk to the indigenous priests, find out what it's used for. Then you bring sample back to Harvard, and they have them stored in a place they call the herbarium. It's the tallest building on Harvard campus. And once they extract what's in this, they sell that formula to the pharmaceutical companies. But they learned it from you first. But they tell you, oh, that's juju. Oh, that's witchcraft. Oh, that's some crazy stuff. But look what happened with the pandemic. They said Africa is going to be decimated. Africa is going to be destroyed. Oh,
yes. They said a lot.
Yes. But what happened? We chew our lead. We drink our tonic. We're doing better than anybody in the world. But so they're not saying nothing. They're not saying anything now. But
so I think my observation is, by the time, if you're born, let's say, I'm using myself as a typical example. By the time you go to primary school or nursery, maybe 5 years, 7 years there. I mean, before you go, your parents, your mother, your grandparents, they're speaking Twi to me. They were speaking Twi to me. I go to school, because I schooled in the village, they use the Twi. So it's also okay. If you bring it forward to the cities now, by the time the child goes to school, now she has to speak English.
Yes.
By the time that is a conflict, because when you start to speak the English, everything you have to still interpret.
It is an attack on your linguistic system by a colonizing system. It is a deliberate attack because your language carries your culture. Your language carries your spirituality. It's like when someone says, call someone auntie. So when people go with me, I do tours to Ghana. They say, how come everybody's calling this one auntie and this one uncle? There must be big families. I said, no. In the culture, the language describes relationships. And the relationship is, if I'm old enough to be this child's father, but I'm not the father, but I'm the uncle. Because if anything happened to the father, I must take that responsibility. The language explains the relationship, and that becomes a part of your behavior. You see, language also, if you look at all African language, look at the word for person, people, place, or thing, and you will find either in its suffix or prefix their word for the divine. So what the African says in their culture is the divine is in everything. I put it in a simpler term. People get angry. I said, who are you? I said, I'm God having a human experience. Oh, this boy, he's crazy. He done lost his mind. He wants to be God, having a human experience. Let me make that simple for you. If you really want to understand African culture in a nutshell, I can talk about Africa from America. Well, when I left Africa, Africa left with me. Africa is in me. The continent is my home. But all of us who left there, we took our home with us. It's in us. It's in every cell in our body. So if I'm God having a human experience, how does that make sense to a Christian and a Muslim? Break it down. I am and you are, according to African culture, and I can explain any system you want. I am an expression, as is all things in nature, of an aspect of the divine essence having this peculiar experience. No one can disprove that. Let's take it further. Our women. We know in all African culture, the women came before the man. It is only in European culture that God created some man and then took his rib and gave it to a woman. That's the most foolish thing I've ever heard of. Go back as far as you can go in any African culture. It is the woman who arises first. When God, the creation, the totality of the universe, the totality of creation, decided to manifest as human, it manifests as a woman. And that energy from God and that woman created the first child, which the European confused and called Jesus. Well, we were dealing with that woman and child going back in history. As far as you can go, you will see African carvings in ancient Egypt and even further back in ancient Sudan, carvings of the Holy Mother and the child. There is no Christianity yet for tens of thousands of years. So the European misunderstood what we were saying. Let me make that a little plain. I'm talking African culture, but I'm speaking it in English from America, right? My mother, when she gave birth to me, she gave birth to her father and herself. When my grandparents, the four of them, gave birth to my mother and father, they gave birth to themselves. If we take the gene pool back, we'll end up with God. We are all an extension of God because God is the original ancestor. When you pour libation, though we raise the cup first up and we don't pour, then we go to Sasriya and we pour the first cup, and then to whatever else we want to pour. Let's be clear. Our culture understood. When we talk about a Busum, Christian boys run away, Muslim boys run away. But study the Busum. The Busum are the quality and attributes of the divine itself, as it manifests in nature and in things in nature, as it manifests in the cosmos. And so we study the quality and attributes of God and try to adapt them to our character. And always you have one that's more dominant than the other. With the Yorubas, they call it Orisha. But Orishas are not gods. These are qualities and attributes of the divine that manifests itself in nature and cosmology and manifests itself in the human beings. How do you learn to develop these qualities as character so that you can build a society that reflects divinity? That's our culture. But we're afraid of it because the man who murdered our ancestors said it's bad. We're afraid of our culture because the man who raped our ancestors says it's bad. We're afraid of our culture because the people who burned our cities, burned our villages, raped our women, took them away, imprisoned others, says the way of our mothers and fathers are bad, and I'm to love the murderer more than I love my grandmother and my great father? No way.
Sometimes what I find it difficult to understand is I go to, say, the Catholic Church, and I see all these statues there.
All the fetish.
I see all these rituals there.
All the fetish, but they want to put it on us, right?
Then when I go to my village and somebody practices the same thing, the Christians will say what the other person practicing in my village is wrong. But then across the street, I go to Catholic Church and I do the same thing. All the others are, even if it's not Catholic, in the modern day, they
want
use
to impose their ideology on your thoughts instead of allowing you to carry the ideology and the philosophy and the worldview of your ancestors that derives, and this is important, that derives from your family's historical experience and not from his family historical experience.
Wow. And so that's where they change the identity.
But again, we never lost it. They simply interrupted.
All right.
I remember when the pandemic started and I called one of my younger brothers. He don't want me to call his name on TV because sometimes he could be a bad boy in a crowd. But things were difficult. So he went home to the village. And then I was talking to his dad. And the first thing Dad said to me, I know you're in a difficult situation, Prof. So we're now going to the shrine to pray for you, our shrine. So my nice little Christian brothers from Accra, he made sure when things got tough with the pandemic to go to the village, to the indigenous shrine, to make sure everything's going to be all right when he gets back in Accra. So we never lost it. It's
Okay.
just that the Western system, in trying to keep their dominance over our psychology, still want to suppress our indigenous culture and its values. They allowed the Japanese to exercise their Shinto religion. They
Yes.
allowed the Indian to exercise their Hindu religion.
Yep.
They allow, but when it comes to us, we under full frontal attack. And the reason you cannot control the mind of a man if his ancestors have control. You see?
What did you say? Please say it again.
You cannot control the mind of a man if his ancestors have that control. So you must destroy his link to his ancestors.
So that you can have his mind.
That's right. Stephen Biko, our beautiful young brother from South Africa who they murdered.
Yeah,
Stephen said it better. Stephen says the most powerful weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The most powerful weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed.
So this battle is been battle of the mind, of our mind.
Or the battle of our mind. And the only way they can defeat us if they cut us off from our indigenous philosophy, our indigenous worldview, our indigenous sacred science, our indigenous medical understanding, our indigenous technical approach to reality.
But if you go through school in Africa, we are cut off from all these.
Yes, and that is the reason. They're coming to steal your wealth. They can't have you conscious. They got to put you to sleep. They've got to make you unconscious. In order for me to steal from you in broad daylight, I've got to blind your eyes. You know.
I noticed something. It's very easy for two Africans to converse, to have a conversation, when they have deep sense of history of Africa. I think that is the common denominator.
Yes.
You connect with any Black person, any African, anywhere, when the depth of their knowledge on themselves is what should I put it? If it's quality, we connect easily. If you see an African who is trying to help another African, it's because they are conscious.
Yes.
You see an African who is proud of the prospects, of the prosperity, and who is so hopeful of Africa, the power, the wealth, is because of the depth of their history.
Yes.
It means the mind is not gone.
No. And all we have to do, because our institution is not gone, they're in every village in Ghana.
Yes.
They just have us looking away from it, only turning to it in the darkness. Oh, I went to hospital. They can do nothing for me. So I got to go to the village. Come on. All right. So and we know we still believe in it, but we're afraid to show the world that
it's true. It's true. The COVID, almost everybody, you see them take the neem tree. They will boil it. They will drink some. You see a lot of people making their own medicine. And even the doctors will tell you the same thing.
Listen,
everywhere.
Listen, I'm right here with you. I'm right here. Okay? So here I go. Yeah.
Which one is that?
Well, I'm not gonna tell you what my medicine is now, but you see it. You see how black it is. Hey, you see?
Wow.
You see, because we got to keep ourselves together when you go up against an enemy. You got to have your medicine.
It's true. You know? I have some few questions. I have some questions that I would want your answers. Yeah. So somebody will say, so how come? I know you have explained, but I will still want to go through the questions with the depth of the answers that you give us. How come Africa was Europeans were able to conquer Africa if Africans were that great? This is something that I usually hear from those of us who have been through this Western kind of education.
That's the first thing they ask. And I always say, we weren't that great. We're still greater than that. Have we seek vengeance on the European? Have we murdered him at large for the dirt he did? No, because we are a higher being. We are a higher being. We could slaughter him any day we want. 80 million of us live in America. And if you watch TV, anytime we want to close this thing down, don't we close it down? Don't we shake his whole country up? You know, all we got to do is go in the street, and only a few thousand of us go in the streets. Every election, they want to know, what is the black vote? What is the black vote? What is the black vote? Let me tell you something. The only reason they defeated us, there was two reasons. They had the gun technology, something we did not have, and they had no respect for human life.
They had the gun, and they had no respect for human lives.
That's right. Let me tell you a story, the story of the Zulu nation. After the Berlin Conference, when all of Europe in 1883 get together, by 1885, they've come up with their filthy, dirty scheme on how to invade and rob Africa. Every European army, backed by American money, invades us from the north, from the east, the south, and the west, and it killed millions of our people, and they don't even call it a war. They don't even call it a war. You know, but if we knew history, we would be proud. Yes, we lost the battle in the end in many ways, but we would be proud. When they came to Ethiopia, Menelik crushed the Italians. Learn the story of Menelik crushing the Italians. When they came to the Sudan, the Turks, the Brits, and the Arabs, 30,000 strong, in 1836, Muhammad Ahmed sent them back with only 3,000 living soldiers. The Battle of Khartoum. When they went to South Africa, the Battle of Islamabad, the King Setuweya crushed the Brits, killed 2,000 in one day with just spears against their guns and their recalling rifle. And that battle at Islamabad brought down the Robespierre government in England. They'll tell you Robespierre government fell, but they won't tell you it fell because of the defeat of the British troops in South Africa by the Zulu nation led by Setuweya. So
led by who?
His name is Setuweya. He was king of the Zulu. There was even a greater battle before that one, Bambata, who broke the back of their army. Great Bambata, you know. But Setuweya's battle was so significant because it brought the whole government in London to the ground, and they had to resign. Because the Brits look up and said, how you let them black folks destroy our best army? And it was a feud. Two of the wives of a minor king had a difficulty with their husband, the king. So they ran away to the white man's military camp. So the king says, I want my wives. Of course, the soldiers in the camp said no. So they wiped him out, took his wife. That's what a man should do. Then the British sent in the 2 brigades and go to the main king, Setuweya, and said, turn that king over to us to be punished. He says, you don't have no authority to punish my subjects. So the British said, if you don't turn him over, we will attack. And Setuweya said, bring it on. And he slaughters them. But they don't tell us that history.
No, that one, no. Unless you search, you won't find it.
No. But there's a good book. It's a book by, and I always like to drop books. It's by Robin Walker. Robin Walker. He's in the UK. And it's called When We Ruled.
When We Ruled.
When We Ruled. It's a history of Africa that's extraordinary. Get that book. But also the United Nations, the UNESCO History of Africa. It's 8 volumes. Oh my God, there's so much facts there because so many African scholars wrote there. Theophila Benga from Congo Brazzaville, Cheikh Anta Diop from Senegal. Cheikh Anta Diop's book, Cultural Unity of Black Africa, should be a must-read by everyone. Kwame Nkrumah's neo-colonialism should be a must-read. I see you smiling all the time. You must be an NPP man. But that's
hey, no comment. No comment.
Okay. Well, my daughter's in Parliament, and she's NPP because her mom is NDC.
Yeah.
So the family get along very happy,
Wow.
Both sides. But the point is, history. If our young people began to learn the history, they didn't just defeat us. We put up a resistance against superior gun technology.
Professor, so how do we now? You ordinarily, if you leave it with just the government, maybe they will just touch one or two of these. But the depth of it, that can withstand.
The government can't do it. It must be a movement from among the people to insist that the history from the perspective of the African must be taught in the schools.
Yes.
Okay. It must be taught. How are you going to tell me when I think of what's his name from down in he was Fanti, not Agre, but even the story of the Agre family coming out of what's the Fort William area down there. Just how that family started out during the enslavement period, where one of the daughter married the enslaver from London, but they turned it around a few generations later and became the leading resistance against colonialism and slavery in the Fanti area.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember the other brother who was one of the first lawyers, Ghanaian lawyers, to be trained.
Is it Saba?
Mensah Saba.
Yeah.
The story of Mensah Saba. Don't blame him because he leaned towards Christianity. Learn how he used that to bring education to his people, to raise them up so that we could compete against the tyranny. So understand Mensah Saba. Study Mensah Saba, but study him from the African point of view. Study him from the mind of the African aspirations. Tell the Mensah Saba story from Mensah Saba's soul, not from the British soul. And you'll see another Mensah Saba. So
my next question. Sometimes you go to some of our villages in Africa, Ghana, included. You see a chief who is well dressed and who is looking for help from this young European man. The chief, for me, seems like he understands the culture and the tradition. So how come he's waiting for help? What is he missing? What's in deficit? What is he missing?
Well, we have to look at all of the contradictions, economic, political, and cultural.
Okay.
The chief's job is to bring prosperity to that village.
Okay.
The government is already structured on a European colonial premises. Matter of fact, the very reason we have borders in Africa, that is a colonial construction. These so-called nation state are colonial constructions. There are some chiefs, like any institutions, you will have people who may be corrupt to some degree or another, but it may not be corruption at all. The whole nation is dealing with Europe and with Asia. So why not the chief? The thing is, what is going to be the cultural imperative that determine boundaries? You see, what culture is determining the boundaries and how we deal with these other people? Maya Gogoheni don't play that game. That's why I love him.
All right.
Nana is like, I don't play that game. He's a traditionalist, 100%. Yes. And he leans heavy on those of us who are his Akosahenis around the world, especially here in America, to help. So like his 45th anniversary is coming up, I'm going to go all out to make sure the resources necessary reach Agogo. So that can be a glorious 45th. they have the eye hospital there, which was brought by some white Europeans a long time ago, because they came to that village and they were helped and their lives were saved. So they donated and began that eye hospital, which is one of the best in the countries.
Okay.
And so bringing medical supplies and assistance to help that hospital, bringing finances and resources to help that hospital.
Is that the Stanford Hospital?
Huh?
Is that the Stanford Hospital? Something they call Stanford Hospital?
I forgot the name, and it,
Okay.
and it could be.
Right.
But it's one of the best eye hospital in the Ashanti region.
Okay.
You know, but it's up in Agogo.
Okay.
But that's just a little thing. Every village need functional clinics. Cuba has the best model. You don't need big hospitals. You need small clinics, because most people don't need to be hospitalized. That's a waste of money. In the capital, where you have multiple people, yes, hospitals make more sense. In the village, a small clinic with maybe one operating room, you know, and certain amount of beds. But the issue should be about staying healthy, not keeping people sick to make money. You see, that's the Western concept. I'll keep you sick and sell you pills. The African concept, I will make you healthy with your herbs and your diet.
Okay. Now, if you go to northern part of Ghana, northern part of Nigeria, you see Africans who have totally lost everything. The names are gone. They are Arabic names. The dressing is Arabic. To what extent do you think Islam has destroyed Africa?
Okay, first, I spent a lot of time in the north, in Tamale, Salaga, Pega, and those places, and I don't think they're totally lost. Okay. I can speak in that language. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, ihdina as-siratal mustaqim, ihdina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. I can do all their prayers. I can speak some of their language. I've been to Mecca twice. It didn't disturb me. The disturbance it did was to show me how un-African the system was. And when I studied the system, Islam comes right out of Africa.
Okay.
It's an African system that got Arabized, like Christianity. Christianity is born in Africa, but it gets Europeanized. The Hebrew Jewish tradition is born in Africa, but it gets Europeanized because they didn't get the whole package. They only got a piece of it.
So what you're saying is the original seed is African, but then it got processed and it got adulterated.
And it came back in somebody else's cultural costume.
Okay.
So when we see the brothers and sisters in the North, yes, they practice Islam because that was imposed on them centuries ago. But they do the same thing you do with the Christian in
the South.
Ashanti in Kumasi. He's a Christian, but he still keeps the ancestral shrine. He still observe a Kwesi die, right? Okay. They do the same thing in the North. You know, they say they do the Islam, but they don't give up the indigenous piece. And you will find that throughout when you go in the North. At first, it's deceptive. The dress will fool you.
Okay.
You know? But then when you're among the people for a while, yes, they practice many of the traditions we're calling Islamic, by the way, is not Islamic at all. These are African traditions that Islamic people do. So we have to, that's why studying history and culture will let you see that people have deceived us. Even if, you know, one of the biggest things the Arabs say, if you call the Prophet Muhammad black, it could cost you your life. Well, I read the Quran. His grandma's name is Qadir. So that says she was black. So what's her grandson going to be? So we need to study history. History will erase the mystery.
Wow, history will erase the mystery. So what are some of the, I also hear this a lot. The sodas, Africa sodas, especially those in the diaspora. Africa sodas. Africa hates us. They love us. When we come to Africa, would they welcome us? How do you answer these things?
I heard some of that. But let me step back just to the Muslim thing in the beginning. Yes, Islam have been an enemy to Africa in the hands of non-Africans.
Okay.
That's why it's important to study that history.
Okay.
You will find through much of the history of the Western Sudan, which Ghana is a part of what is called the Western Sudan, and Nigeria, Borneo, you will find that African Muslims had to fight their biggest war against Arab and Turkish Muslims to defend the integrity of Africa. So, and when we look at the system as it manifests in Senegal, certainly you cannot call that an Arab system. So that's why we need to study history so that we can delineate between what is appropriate and what is inappropriate behavior, and what is African culture and what is foreign imposition on African culture by these other religious systems that was not born in Africa, but came in Africa as the enemy, but was consumed and adopted by us and used to help liberate ourselves from those same enemies. So when you look at Queen Amanatu in the great Borneo kingdom, you know, she took on for 34 years the Turkish Ottoman Empire, you know. And you find the same thing in the Mali kingdom and the Songhai kingdom. They were fighting against the Arabs who had invaded North Africa and drove us down into Niger and Mali and Songhai, because we used to live all the way up in Tunisia and Morocco. So you can't, it's not just black and white. That's why you've got to study the history.
That's right. Would you say the same thing as Christianity as well? That the African Christians they didn't use Christianity to destroy. Would you want to say
we're not using Christianity to our advantage like we did 50 years ago? Okay. 50 years ago, Christianity was a revolutionary weapon. Now Christianity is used to degrade African culture and African spirituality in a way that was never the way it functioned initially. Now, the enemy's form of Christianity was to control our minds, but our ancestors took it and worked their own juju, if you want to call it that. They worked their own magic with it and made it work for them. Now we're allowing Christianity to work against us because we're allowing it to kill our culture, to kill our ancestry, to kill our memories. And if you can't remember, you can't imagine. If you can't imagine, you can't create.
You can create if you can imagine it.
Absolutely. And you can't imagine if you can't remember. So now let's come to that African-American question.
Yes.
You find people foolishly over here. And some even try to use my words to misinterpret what I meant when I've been critical of behavior on Africans from the continent and their alliance and allegiance with immigrant groups and white Americans instead of allying themselves with their African brothers and sisters. But if you go back for as long as we've been in America, we never detached, okay? Sierra Leone, we left here and we built Freetown in the 1700s. Liberia, despite the contradictions and the fighting in Liberia, that's us. We left here and we bought that land and we built Liberia. Before the American Civil War, a man named Martin Delany, who became a major in the American Army, his grandfather was from a place in Nigeria called Abeokuta. He was captured and sold into slavery. So he went back to Abeokuta in the mid-1800s, his grandson, and he says, I want to bring all my people back to Africa. This is the 1800s. And they formed the Niger Valley Association to move us home. But then the American Civil War happened, and so the operation never took place. Booker T. Washington tried to build, in the early 1900s, a model agricultural system in Togo. He had to abandon it because the Germans tried to take it over and use it like the American plantation system. So Booker and Tuskegee abandoned the project.
Was it, you said in Togo?
In Togo, yes. Before that project in Togo, Booker held a conference at Tuskegee Institute in 1910, I think. This is before the first Pan-African Conference. And it was called the Conference of the Negro World. People came from Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Jamaica. This is before the first Pan-African Conference. We never stopped our relationship with our people. Back in the 1892, one of the strongest Black organizations was called the Afro-American League, 1892, led by a man named T. Thomas Fortune. That's the organization that became the Niagara Movement. Then it morphed into the NAACP, but it started out as the Afro-American League. Okay. There was always those who was ignorant and didn't understand our relationship to home. But there were always those who never forgot the relationship to home. And that has been a constant. Even Mr. Booker T. Washington, when W.E. Du Bois went to London to set up the Pan-African Conference, Booker T. Washington accompanied him there and paid for their journey. He didn't attend the conference, but he didn't have to. He paid for it. And he used his propaganda machine to promote it. But the white man would make us see Booker T here and Du Bois here. They had an argument. They were together for 30-something years. One argument dwarfs 30 years of a relationship. Mr. Booker gave Du Bois his first job. They tried to...
Because Du Bois is well known in Ghana.
Right.
Booker T. Washington, unless you're very inquisitive, you will
was
know.
A much greater leader and contributed much more than Du Bois did. But the white man didn't like him because he was a nationalist.
He was a nationalist.
He was a nationalist. He said, control the land where you are. Control the technology that is present in today's system. We don't want to integrate with the whites. Let us build our own economic base. Dad did not want that teaching in America. You see? So they marginalized Mr. Booker. But he left us a great institution called Tuskegee Institute. Du Bois didn't leave us that. We got to know Marcus Garvey because Booker T. Washington invited him to come to America with his program. And Garvey said when he started the UNIA, I'm here to implement the Tuskegee model. And this is written in the documents by Dr. Tony Martin, who writes most of the biography, God bless Tony's soul, of Brother Garvey. So that's why studying history erases the white man mystery and allow us to fix our relationship with one another. Kwame Nkrumah, Ezekwe, how many of your great leaders went to Lincoln University with us before they came home to become leaders? So how people act like we're never together when we've never truly been torn apart except in our minds. Except in our minds.
Wow.
We just had the year of return in Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, oh, that's a big thing. And yes, it was a big, beautiful thing. But there are already 6,000 African Americans living there before the year of return.
It's true. Yep.
Hey,
it's true.
We're living in Tanzania. We're living in Kenya. We're living in Uganda. We're living in South Africa. But people pretend it doesn't exist. So we got to blow our own horns and say we do exist. You know, we do exist.
I want to pick your mind on our contribution in industry, in finance, in technology, in innovation. You just talked of Mr. Washington or Dr. Washington, I think.
Yeah.
So from entrepreneurship, give us some of the examples of, throughout history. It could be from any time.
Oh, of course.
Africa, because sometimes you hear.
Right. And the white man has so stolen our technology. Let's take something simple.
Yes.
Cotton gin, right? During the time of slavery, cotton was one of the last biggest commodity that brought billions and billions of dollars to America, selling the cotton to Europe, to the textile mills. And so the African people who were enslaved, they had a way of using the comb to comb the seeds out of the cotton. The white man came and make a machine with a big comb. So they say he invented the cotton gin. No, he took the African idea of combing the seeds, and he simply had the money to make a bigger comb. That's all a cotton gin is. It's a comb. So he steals this idea from the African peoples. During the British operation controlling of America in the early 1700s, they had a smallpox outbreak. An African man in Massachusetts showed them how to take the pus from the cow and use that pus to inoculate the victims of the smallpox. That started vaccine in America. After the Civil War, there was a man. His name was Lewis Lattimore. He was in the Navy. He got out. He was a patent engineer, and so when he got out of the Navy, he got hired by a man named Thomas Edison. Two British gentlemen invented the light bulb, but they could only keep it burning for 2 seconds. So they sold the project to this Thomas Edison. Edison couldn't make the light bulb work. So he gave it to his only black scientist, Lewis Latimer. And he remembered his father and mother on the plantation would burn the cotton seeds to keep their hands warm at night. And he realized that it glowed all night. So he came up with the carbon filament, which made the light bulb a practical tool and industrialized America. You see the cell phone, and this cell phone is invented by a black man. All of the ingredients, the coltan and the cobalt, comes from the Congo. Without the black man invention, without the coltan, there would be no phone. You see this push button house phone. Oh, I got to put it here. This invented by a black African American woman. You see the remote to your TV is invented by an African American man. You see the desktop computer that's invented by an African American man. We on the internet. That's a Nigerian, or I can't remember if it's Nigeria or Ghana. It's not a white man invention. This is an African invention. Even the email is a black-skinned Indian invention, and he won the case in court and defeat the Americans and had to pay him. You can go on and on. The street lights in Paris and in London was put there by an African American engineer. Okay.
You just said something. You said that there was somebody who was using comb for the cotton, and then the man took it and commercialized it.
Right, and that concept came from Sierra Leone.
Okay, I think they use the same thing across all industries.
They do.
Okay. They use that where we innovate, and then they take it, get the financing, structure it, mass produce it, and say they did it.
That's what happens, and they're still doing that today. So we could just go on. Even blood plasma that no one can live without today. That's an African American doctor, and then he ended up dying in a car accident because they hesitated to give him blood because he was a black man. His name is Charles Drew. They say, "Oh, that's not what really happened." Yes, that's what happened. We live in America. We know what you do. You know. And you remember the first open heart surgery in South Africa. The black man who assisted and really guided Christian or whatever they got through that, he wasn't even in medical school. He had never been to medical school. He only finished secondary school. When we study the history of our technical inventions and contributions to Western civilization, especially the contemporary, they would be in the dark ages without the African, even now. But that's why you know history, it'll erase the mystery. It'll give you self-worth, self-value, self-esteem.
Yes.
and a love for your ancestry.
Yeah. I read somewhere where the African Americans built a whole financial city, and I read that it was burnt down. What was it, and how did that contribute to the current state of African businesses in America?
Ask that again. Let me get it clear.
I heard somewhere that there was a time that the whole financial city, which was built by African Americans,
I know
was
about
destroyed.
Black Wall Street,
Okay.
Tulsa, Oklahoma. But it wasn't just one. They destroyed multiples of our economic cities. Tulsa, Oklahoma was the biggest one in the 1920s. And they attacked us with a paramilitary unit called the Ku Klux Klan and the sheriff. It was called Greenwood, and it was in the major city of Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was one of the wealthiest territories in that state. And just jealousy and envy, because the whites wanted our territory. But they didn't defeat us outright. See, there's a myth in the history. There was a group of young men who had served in the First World War. And they had met many of their brothers and sisters from Senegal, from Mali, from Ghana, from Nigeria, who also fought in that war for the British and the French. And so those men came back home and they called themselves the African Blood Brotherhood. They formed themselves in New York. And when that attack came, they went out to Tulsa and defended the Black people. We defeated them. We defeated them on ground. So they went up in the air with their airplanes and dropped gasoline bombs on our houses and created a firestorm. You see? And then there was Wilmington, North Carolina, which was another one of those Black cities and Black economic center. We came under attack in 68 or 69. And they murdered over 2,000 Blacks and burnt our places down. Then there was Rosewood in Florida, which was another one of those Black cities. Again, we came under attack militarily, and they burnt our entire town down. But we defended ourselves, but we were always outnumbered. So some were more successful. If you went to Durham, North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, where you'll still find one of the biggest Black insurance companies in America is there. Or Richmond, Virginia. There's a woman named Maggie Walker. Her mother came from Africa and was enslaved. And right after slavery, the daughter opened the biggest bank in Virginia. And when the stock market crashed in America in the 1920s, her bank was so solvent, she was able to keep the white banks afloat by loaning them money. So there's so much of our story that if we knew, we would never look down
upon ourselves.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. So
I want you to tell us.
History erases the white man's mystery.
Wow.
Let us work our African magic.
I want you to explain. You hear of racism, power control, economics, world trade, global trade. What is the chain? If I live in Ghana, some people will even try to link tribalism as racism, and I tell them no, that is not so.
That's insanity.
Tribalism, yes, you could be prejudiced towards another person, even in a family. But if you are in a country, nobody is prevented access to power or wealth because of your tribe.
And
racism,
tribal disagreements and contradiction does not take away your humanity.
That's right.
Racism tries to take away your humanity. Okay. You see? And one of the
so what is racism?
Racism is the inferiority of the white man towards the African. The white man feels inferior towards the African. So he uses brutality and his tyranny and his genocide to pretense superior towards the Black man. You understand?
Yes, sir.
See, that needs to be understood clearly, because people use the term white supremacy. There's nothing supreme about a murderer and a genocide and a thief and a liar. There's nothing supreme about that. It is because they are inferior to the African, and they feel this inferiority. Instead of partnering with us and growing together, they would rather try to destroy us. And so racism is when someone has the economic and military power to impose their prejudice on someone else. That's the definition.
There was a time I was in England. I was in a lift, and this gentleman who were in a hospital somewhere was going to a hospital to visit somebody. And this white British guy just elbowed me. What informs that? That somebody will just see another human being.
Right.
And out of nowhere, the person has not done you any wrong. And you have that deep hatred.
It is because if he had to walk with you in a normal, natural, human, competitive manner, you would always win, and he knows it. This has nothing to do with us being inferior, because the whole world knows we are not inferior to anyone. The first time God manifests as a human, God manifests as a Black woman. So if you want to go there, I'll take folks, let's go there.
Let's go.
I can work the Adam and Eve story and show you. But look in history. Where is the civilization in England? Is there any sign of ever having a civilization? Is there any sign of a civilization in Spain, in France, in Russia, in Bulgaria, in Germany? No. The only semblance of a civilization is Greece. And the Greeks inform you they learned it from the Africans. So the only place where civilization was built, ancient Karma, which preceded Egypt, which is in the Sudan, in Uganda. And that grew up to be greater Egypt. Great Zimbabwe. Such an extraordinary civilization we don't learn anything about. Monomatapa. The great Swahili states. The great kingdom of Mali, Songhai, Borneo, Ghana. Those were civilizations that had universities. Matter of fact, one of the greatest trade we had with Europe in the 12th and 1300s was selling them books coming from Timbuktu. We gave them soap. They didn't know how to wash their bodies. We taught them how to bathe, how to put perfume so you smell good, you know.
So how has racism affected the current creation of so-called wealth? If I look at the billionaire list in the world, a lot of them I see are white male.
Right.
And sometimes I see Africans quoting them.
Right.
But I'm of the opinion that there is some structural advantage.
Remember, the wealth came from murder, rape, mayhem, and plunder, not from intellectual skills, not from economic savvy. All of the wealth of the West comes from the robbery of Africa and Asia and Mesoamerica. All of it. None of it came from good trade agreements. That's a lie. Racism becomes the institution to marginalize through misinformation and maltreatment of the majority of the world's population. The European is only 1/9 of the world's population. 1/9.
Yeah.
But it controls the most of the world's wealth.
Yeah.
That's above ground.
Yeah.
We still have more wealth in the ground than has been taken out of the ground. So maybe our battle is to make sure we don't lose any more of the wealth in the ground. Because it's going to be very hard to get the one that has gone back.
Okay.
So new trade arrangements, new economic alignments need to come, but it's going to take the young people and it's going to take the intellects to inform the politicians serve us or you get one term in office.
I read about the bond of 1844.
Mm-hmm.
And that was agreement between the coastal chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the British used that, extended their boundaries, and said that they had good cause.
Right.
The Ashantis were not part of the bond.
Right.
The Dagombas were not part of the bond.
Right.
But they exceeded even the agreement that the coastal chiefs had with them. So I'm saying that to support what you're saying.
And even the coastal chiefs signed that agreement under military duress. There was a gun to their head.
Okay.
There was a cannon pointed at their village. There was a military brigade in their town. What choice did they have? And the reason we get the Ya Santiwa War is in response to that, with them coming to Kumasi with their guns, and to be bold enough and arrogant enough to ask for the golden stool.
Yes.
You see? And so go ahead.
I read somewhere that Ashantis never wanted to have any European education up until 1900.
Mm-hmm.
They withstood that. They didn't want to be part of it. Do you think they were right or they were wrong? Having, they came in the 14th, 15th century.
They were very right. If you're not informed by the culture and the language and the history of your ancestors, then you're bound to be a slave of the culture and the language and the history of your enemies. It's as simple as that.
Wow.
Okay, so I have one of the arguments Papa Koto and the Asante had, and the Dagombas with Nkrumah, was they wanted a federated state where Ashanti could maintain its semi-autonomy culturally, because Ashanti is a cultural state. But people don't understand culture is not just dancing, singing, and drumming and music. Those are tools of culture. Culture is the philosophical understanding and worldview of how to live together as human beings.
In Ghana, if you go to school, I went to school in Asante, I went to school in Kumasi. In as much as we go through the school system, you see that we don't find it very difficult to leave the school and start something on our own, because the culture is very strong. Mm-hmm. If you come to the secondary school, we even speak Twi, not English.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you, pick 3, 4 in code tribes, let's say Yoruba or say Akan or any other, the achievement that they have had. So let's get to say Yoruba. What is it that they have done that the young people can look back and say, we have achieved something? Or if, let's say, you pick the Akans or you pick another tribe, let's say in the Belt.
With the Yoruba. Because in the Yoruba, I'm Obenjoko at Debayo. So I can do my Yoruba. The Yoruba, in constructing the nation state that would become Oyo, Benin, and much of that part of Nigeria where they live, if you study that history, going back to Oduduwa because the way we tell our story of history is culture and metaphor. Metaphor is simply an educational tool to explain concepts, ideas, and principles in a small capsule that would take an encyclopedia to explain it linguistically. And so you'll see that the concept where Oduduwa comes in and takes over the Yoruba nation and gets control of Ife, if you study that history, and then brings in the Ogun concept, you'll see that's the history of technology, especially steel and iron working technology, coming into West Africa before it ever emerges in Europe. Okay, just that little piece. But if you look at the philosophy of the Yoruba religion, say, I'm a priest in the Yoruba tradition. Yes, I'm a priest. I got all kinds of, if you don't think so, I am a real, I can show you all of the ones I've earned. And so you hear the story of Shango.
Yes.
Shango is the king, the Alafin. And the story of Shango is about this king who is really arrogant, pompous, out of control. And on one occasion, he had his two brothers fighting to the death. Then he would give the wealth to the one who wins. And the two brothers who did not want to fight each other, but the big brother, the king, forced them to. So one brother killed the other. Then he realized, oh my God, in my arrogance and my ego and my pompous, I've caused the death of my own brother for my pleasure. So he runs off into the forest and he commits suicide. But he's saved by Oya, who cuts him down. And then the cry of Obakoso, the king is not dead, the king is not dead, comes. And so in that metaphor, later on, she will marry. There's a lot of different stories about the relationship between Oya, Shango, and Ogun. But let me give you one of them. She's married to Shango. Shango, in just that little episode, metaphor I told you, represents the realization of a flawed character that is struggling to raise themselves to a higher ethical self. So that need for change, that courage to change that is represented by Shango on that occasion marries Oya. Oya symbol is the wind. Her metaphorical interpretation is change in process. So Shango, the need for change, the realization for change, marries change. But in the further the metaphor goes, Oya will marry Ogun, the god of iron, the god of war. But that is a metaphor for transformation. See, if you're going to get iron, you got to take a piece of stone and you got to burn the impurities out of it in the fire. And the impurities will produce steel. Now you got a usable commodity to make tools, to make weapons. So that's Ogun. So Shango, the need and the realization for change, in the metaphor, marries Oya, change in process, who then practice polyandry and marry Ogun, transformation as a result of change. So what you're doing when you're looking at these orishas, you're looking at a dissertation on African philosophy. Same thing with a bosun, you see. And that's why we've got to return and study what they made us leave behind. There was an African-American anthropologist in the 1920s and 30s. Her name was Zora Neale Hurston. She wrote multiple books, but she had one saying. She says, to be there, to be African, you got to go there. But to go there, you got to know there. To be there, you got to go there. But to go there, you got to know there. Africa is a worldview. Africa is an interpretation of cosmology and ecology. Africa is a dissertation on the laws of nature as it should be applied to the human experience. Africa is the social ecology that has been created as a result of the understanding of the laws of cosmology and ecology. That's what they've taken away from us. And that's what we must restore.
Wow.
I got a bit of a cold, but it's gotten cold here in America.
Okay, so this one, principles of freedom, truth, and thinking. Where do you position those in the African history and African identity?
Let me read something by another one of my great teachers. His name is Baba Asa Hilliard, Dr. Hilliard. And this is his definition of freedom. He said, our first mistake was that we thought of freedom as a place rather than a continuation of a struggle. And then he says, tyranny never sleeps. Our second mistake was that we thought of freedom as a goal rather than a launching pad from which to reach our goals. Without purpose, freedom hardly matters. Our third mistake was that we thought that freedom made us free. That, however, is license, not freedom at all. And here's how he concluded, and this, I love the concluding statement. He said, freedom is being shackled to identity. Freedom is being shackled to identity, purpose, and direction, and being in constant pursuit. Freedom is being shackled to identity, purpose, and direction, and being in constant pursuit. That means you cannot leave your ancestors behind and expect you're going to be free. You cannot leave your identity behind and expect you're going to be free. You see, your identity is your freedom. I got all sorts of hats. This is one of my favorite hats here. Freedom.
Wow.
Dessalines.
Dessalines. I was about to ask you about him in Haiti.
He said two things that I love. One, he said the enemy, the colonialists, the imperialists that have invaded our lands and would not go home with his bodies and his ideas. He said, Kupetet Bulekai. Kupetet, cut off their heads, Bulekai, burned their dwellings. So that sounds so harsh. They had no problem burning our villages. They had no problem killing our ancestors. So why is that sounding so harsh to you? And then the last thing he said, one of the statements he made before he was assassinated by those who betrayed the revolution in Haiti, he said, our quest should be freedom or death, liberty or death, nothing short of that. Freedom or death. And if freedom means to be shackled to your identity, your purpose, and its goal, and see it as a continuum, no one will ever enslave us ever again. Ever.
Wow. Where do you put truth in this? How do you compare truth with freedom?
Truth is an understanding of your love for divinity. I love God because I love me. I love me because I am the expression of that aspect of God having this experience. One cannot love God and not love themselves. And so if we behave in a manner that shows self-ignorance, self-arrogance, and the lack of self-love, and still go to church and still go to mosque and still go to temple, we're just a hypocrite. You can't love God unless you love yourself. And you can't love yourself unless you know God. And you can't know God if you don't know your ancestry. Tell me, who loves you more than your mother? Who loves you more than your grandmother and grandfather? Who loves you more than your great parents? So how dare us spit in their face, call them juju, fetish, witchcraft, all those foolish titles from Europe, and expect they would bless us to be free? Until we tell them we love them. Until people say, oh, you romanticize Africa. I have a romance with anything I love. So I will romanticize Africa until I die because I love her.
Wow.
She's my lover.
How could Europeans talk of freedom, truth, love, and be that wicked?
Look at his society. Do you see freedom? Do you see love? You see abortion, divorce, murder, prisons full everywhere, drugs everywhere. Do you see? He's describing one society, but don't you? You've lived there. You saw the real deal, didn't you? And it's nothing like he describes, is it? I live in the house of the devil, but I walk with God. See? So he didn't come, they could have come to Ghana when we discovered the oil wells near Cote d'Ivoire. And they could have said, we will give you the same price we give the people in Dubai and Saudi Arabia. But no, you did your filthy, dirty deal and we end up with 10%. How can we make any money to help our children build new schools with that? You come for our gold. You could have cut a real deal and said, we build a gold refinery here in Ghana to get jobs to the Ghanaian people. But no, you cut your dirty deal behind the scene with the boys you trade in Europe and America and send back home to run our enterprise. No disrespect, because I got to come to Ghana. I don't want nobody to run me out of town. When you had your Valco, you were so filthy with Valco, it was ridiculous. All that bauxite in Ghana. Did you mine the bauxite in Ghana to feed Valco? To put tens of thousands of Ghanaians to work? No. You brought your bauxite from outside. It takes 6 steps to make aluminum. You brought the pellet in the 3rd step phase without even touching the bauxite in Ghana. You call yourself my friend? You understand? I hope the people understand and hear me. I'm just saying, we have a time where we say, I'm just saying, what could we have done and what did we do?
The other day, I watched this video of a man who says he's from Sri Lanka. And it's something that I've found it in test that the education system that they left here was designed so that we will not have a lot of technical people to take care of our own minerals across board. Which means that if you look at University of Ghana, for instance, it started, I think, in the 50s or so. And the one I went to is the same. Most of our heroes were not engineers, were not so technical to commercialize or to build, to take our minerals and process them here. And I found a test that actually attested to that it was intentional so that they would just move our raw materials.
Right.
And this guy was saying it the other time that all these structures, UN, IMF, democracy, our school, they just designed that.
All of that was designed to help us. All of that. After the Second World War, Germany had decimated the great British Empire. It knew that its colonies were going to be free. So they had to manage the freedom so that they didn't lose control over the wealth. And so they created the United Nations, then the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. So here these broke people, these poor white people, no resources in their country, taking out billions upon billions from us, then give us $5 million to build a road, and a loan with an interest that's ridiculous. And say they're giving us aid. Every million they've taken from us, we've taken back from them. They've taken $1 billion from us. So who's aiding who? We give you aid. Without our money, without the wealth of Africa, the European and American economy would crumble overnight.
That's right.
And so we have to be sensible enough to say, okay, listen, I'm not afraid of your assassination. You assassinated Sankara. You overthrow Bagbo. You assassinated Nkrumah. Oh, yeah, they assassinated Nkrumah, but not the ones you think. The Americans overthrew him and the Russians helped to assassinate him when Nkrumah wouldn't bring back an army, as I understand, to slaughter his own people to get power back. When he said, no, I won't do that to Ghana, then the other side killed him and send his body home. So that's why if we study history, we get rid of this white man mystery and have a sense of our reality and how to work our magic to get control of our lives back in our hands.
Wow. What would you prescribe? This is 2020. I read somewhere that at the end of this century, Africa or blacks will be more than half of the world's population. From now to that time.
Right now.
Right now we are.
Right now.
That's right.
The Africans on the continent in Europe In Central South America and the Caribbean and North America, we're already half of the world's population.
That's right. Okay.
We're the largest population. When they separate us in pieces, we look smaller. When we look at ourselves as one race, we're the largest population in the world.
Okay. You said something that they were able to destroy some of the things that we had because of the gunpowder technology.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think systems and structures in terms of building the so-called technology, whether it's in industry, in transport, in housing, in data processing, these areas, do you?
That's why you've got to study history to erase the white man's mystery. Then you can work your African black magic.
There are churches everywhere in Ghana. Churches everywhere in Ghana. Every young man is starting a church. So long as I see that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to come closer to
don't make me be mean now. Then the churches meet me at the airport and say, "Oh boy, to America." A church, like any institution, can either be used for the benefit of the group or to the detriment of the group.
So how is it now? Is it for our benefit now, or
for right now? It's to our detriment.
It's our detriment. How do we change that?
By introducing your culture as the governing agent in how the institution is run. By being governed and informed by your history as the motive force behind your culture. The fundamental that all human beings is looking for is to provide, and I said this starting, food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security for himself and his family. All the praying we've done, is that in Ghana? Have it been provided?
No.
All the old Bilahi Shaitani regime, Jesus save, has it done it? We're still in crisis. So that means maybe there ain't nothing wrong with the religion. Maybe there's something wrong with how we are using it. You cannot say that I'm Prophet Kwame and I am dressed in the best suits and I have a fine, great big home and I've got all my beautiful Mercedes and my children is going to school in London and New York and you living in poverty, but come to my church every Sunday, let you sing and shout and be happy in poverty. Then me and my family, we are living well, and you go back to your poverty until next Sunday. Come and I'll tranquilize you one more time. No, stop it. The philosophy, the culture behind the church is wrong. The church isn't wrong. The Bible has some beautiful, beautiful, beautiful imperatives. The Quran has some beautiful imperatives, things one can do as a human being to be a better human being to other human beings, to live in harmony and peace. But if you deny the very essence of yourself, your culture, because if you deny your culture, you've denied your ancestors. How can anybody read a book that says, honor thy mother and thy father, that your days may be long upon the land? Well, the reason our days ain't long because we're not honoring the African mothers and fathers. Live what you preach. How can you say, God is made in my image and I walk in church and see a bearded white man? How is that in my image? And then say, oh, God has no color. Then take the white man down. Put him away. Burn it. And just put a cross up there. I agree.
Somebody said
the Bible, but the man's interpretation. Yes, that's true to a degree. But if in any aspect of Christianity or Islam, you leave the culture of Africa behind, if you tell me that my murderer can bring me a religion worthy of my devotion and worship, but my mother and father's religion I will urinate on and will not registered as even having significance, then you can burn your Bible, your Quran, and everything else because it's worthless. look at the condition of our continent and tell me how powerful it is. Yes, it has great wisdom in it, but I can find that wisdom in African culture. Yes, it has great stories, but I can find those stories in African culture before them. Why do I need the white man interpretation of the story that my father created to guide me? There is nothing in that Bible that I can't show you in ancient African literature going back 20 to 30,000 years before the Bible. I'll show you, for instance, this one, then you got to tell me I'm running out of voice. There's a book out of ancient Egypt, when Egypt was black and not a bunch of mixed breed mulatto murderers who have taken our land and desecrate our tomb and call it Egyptology. You rob my grave to steal my wealth, and you call it a science. So the science of stealing dead bodies and desecrate my ancestors, I'm supposed to respect, but I don't. So let me just go. One of our old books is called the Pyramid Text. The Pyramid Text is 35,000 years older than the Bible. Listen to its Genesis story. God says, I create myself out of myself. I cause existence to exist so that existing might exist. And when I realized that I existed, Ma'at was at my side, which is the symbol of the female. And Ma'at means truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, and reciprocity. And then God said, I spat out Shu, meaning the air, and I coughed up Tefnut, which is the moisture that mixed with the gases we call the air. And that moisture and that gas gave birth to Geb and Nut, Nut being all of the elements in space, and Geb being the earth of the planet, the planet Earth. Now, the white man used the word Adam. Adam in Hebrew simply means earth, the black soil. So they don't want to play games. You want to play games? I taught theology, and my doctorate is in theology. So, but I focus more on African theology. So in our book, our God says, I created myself out of myself. And when I realized that I existed, the woman existed beside me. And then we created the moisture and the air, and we created the gases, and they created the elements. And those elements, Geb and Nut, then created a Asar and a Set. That's the one they call Adam and Eve in the Bible. But we already had the story. Then God said, I hiccup. It means to vibrate or to speak. And I brought everything into being that I wanted. So in the Bible, they said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Well, they took it from the African word hika, which is the vibration that brought things into being, which is more consistent with science, by the way, vibration. But he goes further. He said, when I had created all that my heart desired, then I, God, expanded in it. And in his final dissertation, because I'm leaving out a lot, this is the African Genesis story before the Bible, before the Torah, before the Quran. It's the same story they stole and tell in their cultural way. So why do I need them to tell my story? Let me go to my ancestors and hear my own story. I can show you most of the books of Psalms. You can find them in books all over ancient Africa, ancient Sudan, ancient Egypt. So why do I have to listen to some white folks' interpretation, say David wrote something that I can read 20,000 years before David was born in Africa? Study your history and you will erase the white man's mystery. When the Pope came to Cameroon in 2009, that Pope, it was in Time magazine, he said to the Cameroonian Catholics, 7 out of the 10 authors of Christian theology was African. I even have a photograph of the 7 or painting of the picture. The Nicene Conference in 325 AD, when the black men sought to write the African spiritual wisdom down in a book, which would be called the Bible, to civilize the European barbarian. And so that's 325 AD. And then that's the beginning of trying to write that book. They murdered most of the black men who gave them the wisdom of Africa. This is under Constantine, Emperor of Rome. So don't listen to that lie, but he saw a cross in the sky, because that's myth. Study history. The Second Conference of Nicaea, and the First Conference of Trent, and the Second Conference of Trent, and another 3 conferences. It took almost 700 years to come up with the Bible. All right. Now let's not stop there. I want to give my Christian brothers and sisters an education.
I heard that the father of Western civilization, Augustine,
when the Catholic Church is built, when the Catholic Church is conceived, Christianity is already 10,000 years old. 1,000 years old. The Ethiopian Church is almost 800 years older than the Catholic Church. All of the Protestant church in Ghana wouldn't come for even another 500 years. So why should I listen to them? Then let me go back to the Ethiopian church. But the Ethiopian church itself evolved out of the Byzantine church, which is a black church in what is now Turkey and Syria, and the Coptic church, which is the black church in Egypt. It is those 2 churches that merges and produce the Ethiopian church. The Ethiopian church is nearly 1,000 years older than the Catholic Church. So why am I looking to the Catholic Church and its Protestant children it produced that went on to slaughter the world, including Africa, for my understanding of a Christ that my people is already teaching about 30, 40,000 years earlier? Let me hear my story from my ancestors. You see?
Wow, Prof. Thank you so much for the illumination.
Here's another good book, though. The Archons of Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
This is a must-read because it takes you all the way back to some of the things I'm just talking about. Because one of the things Papa Okoto taught me, that the Archons did not have their beginning in Ghana. They simply arrived at this date in Ghana. They can trace their beginnings all the way back to ancient Egypt. And the author is my friend, Kofi Ayem. Kofi Ayem. Extraordinary bit of research we need to read. There's another book, The Archons Who Wrote the Bible. Did you ever hear of that one in Ghana?
No.
Let me look at myself and see. I tried to put it where I could reach it. But I'll send it to you, the author. It's an extraordinary bit of research. If we just listen to our local history, listen to the Akan history, listen to the Ga history, listen to the Ewe history. One of my teachers, Francis Bachwe, God bless Francis' soul, Dr. Bachwe, who was a friend of Malcolm X and one of my professors at the University, City University of New York, when he told me about the Ewe, and a part of Ewe folklore is that they arrived in the Volta coming from Kemet, coming from Egypt, having sojourned with the Yoruba and the Ga and the Fan for a while. And that on the way to Togo, what is now called Togo, they lost the Egyptian crown in the Volta river. And it took them a couple of years to find that throne, which is in the mountains of Togo. First, I thought it was just mythology. But when you listen to the sounding of the language of the Ewe, it is almost a duplicate to the ancient Egyptian language of Medu-Neter. So what's wrong with us? When I was in Togo a few years ago, I was in a beautiful city, the city of the gods, where you don't begin Homowa until you go to that place and get permission for the Wulumas to come back home. Look at Homowa. And you see where the Hebrew get their tradition, where you paint the red mud clay over your door so the evil spirit would fly over. Don't that sound like Passover? You remember they said, God said, put the blood over your door so the angel of death will not stop there.
Yes,
But
and it will pass over.
Somebody took your history and manipulated it. Study your history. It will erase the white man's mystery.
So why are these so difficult for the Africans to believe?
Fear and ignorance.
The Christians
that have been imposed on us by colonialism and
Muslims. They're educated. Those who have gone through the Western kind of education.
They're
very
trained.
difficult for us.
They're trained. They're not educated. They're trained. They're trained in Western ideology. They're trained in Western philosophy. It's like looking at the Muslim system and see how the women is treated. And you can find nothing to support any of that in the Quran. All right. I was an imam for 18 years. The second largest Muslim community in America. El Haji Amin Shahid. That's me. I led. I know Sharia. I know Quran. I know Hadith. They're imposing their European Sikh and the Eurasian Sikh culture on the spiritual value and essence of Islam. The Muslim of Africa, especially West Africa, practice the closest true Islam of any Muslim in the world. And I know, because when I do go to, say, Esocado, and I'm lucky enough to get there during Ramadan, I'm like I'm in heaven, you know. Or if I go to Senegal or to Mali or Burkina Faso, I see a form of Islam different from what I see in the Eurasian East. But that's for a study of our young people. There's a book, it's called Jahiz.
Why the difference?
Listen to this first.
Why the difference?
Jahiz. The author is called Jahiz. The book is called Jahiz by Jahiz. 8th century Iraq. 8th century Iraq. A black man is writing 9 essays. One of the books is called The Superiority of the Black Race Over the White. 8th century Iraq. You can buy the book today. Jahiz by Jahiz. A black African man talking about the reality of his day.
So how do we get young Africans across the world to keep searching? What do we have to tell them? How do we get them? Because, for instance, I'm in Ghana. If you watch the media, you don't want to dig anything. The young average person is obsessed with entertainment and sports and politics and religion, Christianity, Islam.
And they've imported a lot of the foolishness from our weaker side, the hip hop. See, the hip hop has a very positive side, but they don't send that positive side abroad. They send the woman with shaking the booty and the disrespect of our woman, and they send the cussing and the bad language and the talk about violence. That's not how hip hop started. It started as a movement about social commentary that talks about the contradiction and the solution. But then the white man took his money and reconfigured it and created crap and then marketed to the world in our name. But that's not our true story. That's not our true story. So let's study history to erase the lion mystery. And then we can work on Black African magic.
I told some that this is impressive. This is deep. I told somebody that with all the so-called engineering, something they gave me, what really stabilized me and made me relax, and made me believe so much in our continent and its people around the world, is the fact that when I started to read a bit about history, because superficially everything blames us, everything makes us victims. So until you take off the surface, you will not know how beautiful and how fortunate we are to be from
absolutely.
here, and the depth of our heritage.
There's 3 volumes. It's called The African Gold Weight. Try to find the African Gold Weight. It's called African Gold Weight. Where's the book? Where's the Angora Buddha? Oh, here it is. It's called The Akan World of Gold Weights. The Akan World of Gold Weights.
Oh, okay.
The author is, the Akan World of, let me get it so you can get it on the screen, of gold weights. And the author is the brother, see if you can get his name up there, Nyangora Buddha. Nyangora Buddha. He's an ancestor now. I had the pleasure of meeting him twice. He lectured at my class at City University. Then I had the pleasure of traveling to Cote d'Ivoire and meeting him at his home with Dr. Leonard Jeffries. That's 3 volumes on the Akan Gold Weight as a language and mathematics system will blow your mind. Will blow your mind. And then he wrote another book called Drumology, The Science of the Drum. You know, he made me love, I always loved the drum. That one is in French, but you can still get it probably in Ghana and certainly in Cote d'Ivoire. And in the drum, he tells the story of a little boy who's born into a family that is a family of drum masters. And so from the time the little boy is a little boy, he's taken to a tree in the forest to pick. And he lives with that tree and he tends that tree, and that tree becomes his friend, because that is the tree that he's going to make his drum from when he grows up and the tree grow up. And then he meets this monkey family who's also his friend, because there's one of them that will be sacrificed so that the skin from that monkey will cover the drum that he will play to carry the message of our history. Because see, the drum dissertation, there's drums just for dancing and there's drum for celebration, but there's the sacred drum that carries the history of our people, the talking drum that has the history, is the recording of the history of thousands of years. You know that I could go to Ashanti and play the drum and you can hear a tree, right? You can hear the language. You may be losing it because you've been in that European training too long. You know, people can still hear that I can play that drum and you will hear the language.
That's right. From Atumpai.
That's right. Go on, my brother. In that drum is the oral history, thousands of years of our people in those rhythmic dissertations. Let's not lose it, for God's sake. Let's capture it and bring it at the university level. Teach it to the children. We haven't lost anything. Our ancestors have given us the tool to preserve it.
What makes you fulfilled and happy and hopeful?
To wake up and be in my consciousness that I'm an African man. And to know that this race, and I'm going to give you this piece, which I say God and the ancestors give me, came from the belly and the womb of a Black woman. And that Black woman is that, listen to this one, good people, good Christians and Muslims. That woman is that aspect of the divine that creates. Because no baby grow up out of the ground. They don't drop from the sky. No stork come and drop off no basket. That woman's womb don't just represent, but it actually is that aspect of God that creates. understand our culture, you'll understand why we hold the woman where we hold her. And that any notion of disrespecting and denigrating that aspect of God that creates. I know in Yoruba, they call it Obatala. And people say, oh, he's the king of the white cloth. You misunderstand. You got a European interpretation. Obatala is the woman's womb. That's where God's creation of human beings take place. Okay.
So if you meet an African who is frustrated, it means that they are not conscious.
They're just ignorant. And it is our job to erase ignorance with knowledge. It is our job not to condemn the deaf, blind, and dumb, but to give sight to the blind, to give hearing to the deaf, and to give voice to the dumb. Not to condemn them, not to negatively criticize them, but understand our duty, especially those of us who say that we are a kamfo, or we're a priest, or we are educator, we are a scholar. Our duty, because the scholar is the priest in African society, our duty is not to condemn the deaf, blind, and dumb, but to give vision to them, to give hearing to them, and to give voice to them. Otherwise, we are useless. The more you know, the greater servant you should become to your people. Otherwise, the knowledge have no reason. I'm a servant. I enjoy that. I enjoy being a servant. I've had the gun in my hand. I've been in the street. I've been in the mart. I've done all the things any good revolutionary would do. But the greatest revolutionary thing I've ever done was to study history. Study my people's history. And to learn how to tell it back to them in a way that they get it.
Are there any other lessons you want us to learn? And thank you so much for taking 2 hours and 50 minutes.
When I heard from you, I said, oh, I've been talking to people from England, France, Germany, Angola, Cameroon, but nobody was calling me from Ghana. I was feeling kind of left homeless.
Wow.
And so I was so happy to hear. Oh, someone said, one of the Yoruba Orishas about a lot. Yes, thank you.
Wow. And I love what you said. When I called you,
go ahead.
You said that if it's from Ghana, I'm ready. And that was so refreshing.
Oh, I'm just happy. I love you because the Yorubas got a word, and in Cuba they call it they call the African religion Lukomi, but that word in its genesis meant you belong to me and I belong to you. You're mine, I'm yours. Lukomi. You see, the last thing I'd like to give you is that we are the ancestors we pour libations to. When my mother gave birth to me, I'll say it again, listen to it well. She gave birth to herself and my father. And they had been given birth to by their mother and father as themselves. So we are simply the continuum of the first ancestor, which is the divine itself. So when you pour libation to that aspect of yourself that have already gone by. But you, the pourer, is that same self continuum. You know, the Pharaoh Akhenaten, whose name you see used among the Ga and the Ashantis, had a prayer, and it went, "O soul God, you who have given birth to none, and was given birth to by none, you are alone as the totality, the oneness. There's none like it unto you, and I, the Pharaoh, am your servant." The Muslims have the same prayer they borrowed from the African. And there goes, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Kul hu Allah ahad, Allahu samad, walam yulad, walam yulid, Walem yukufuwan ahad, Allahu Akbar. That prayer says, "Oh Allah, you who have given birth to none and was given birth to by none, and there's none likened unto you, and I am your servant." The same African prayer that was done in Egypt 20,000 years earlier. You understand what I'm saying? But knowing history, it erases the enemy's mystery and give you your stuff back. Everybody has stole our stuff and innovated on it to build their social order. So why would I abandon the original copy for the watered down version of my originality? Love your ancestors.
Wow.
Build altars in your house for your ancestors. Get up in the morning. My grandchildren, they don't do nothing. They first they ring the bell at the ancestors' shrine. They freshen their water. They ask them for a good day. They told them they've slept well. Then they go to school. When I come into my house, I bow to them because I am them going forward. They are that aspect of me that has already happened that I can learn from.
I have my last question, and if you have any other, you can add, please. How do we then, this generation, this social media generation, YouTube generation, internet generation, the global African family, those in the Caribbean, those in America, those on the continent,
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend? How do we continue on the conversation? How do we link up more? How do we talk, even if you don't meet physically? How do we share? Because I think the main thing was not knowing, not talking.
Right.
You know, so a lot of the times when there is disagreement and people are talking, it's because we've never been talking. I mean, we've never talked.
Share.
You know, so now,
let people from America hear you read some of J.B. Dankwa or John Mbidis or Chinua Achebe.
Yeah.
You know, and then listen to some of our literature. Listen to Zora Neale Hurston. Listen to Langston Hughes when they talk about Africa and the love for Africa and our freedom. Let's learn Walter Rodney, how Europe underdeveloped Africa. Let's learn Carter G. Woodson, the miseducation of the Negro. Let's learn Cheikh Anta Diop, civilization or barbarism. You know, the cultural unity of Black Africa. There's so much good literature we have on both sides of the Atlantic. Let's talk about that literature. There's a book on Yoruba history by Dr. Akinjobin, who was also one of my good professors. The university had a lot of good African professors, you know, thank God. And it's a history of the Yoruba people and culture. Let me see if I got it here. Yeah, it's called Milestones and Social System in Yoruba History and Culture. And that's the professor's name. So you have it on the screen. And Milestones. This is a wonderful little book. This was the last. He's written a number of books. This is the smallest one, but to me, one of the most informative ones he did on Yoruba history. And just let's learn about our culture, immerse ourselves in our ancestors' spirit. You want them to walk with us? You want them to help us fight our enemy? Then give them the love and respect they deserve. Honor your mothers and your fathers. And then truly, your days will be long. Don't just say you should do it. Do it. Let's talk about Yah Santewa more than we talk about George Washington or Queen Elizabeth. I remember I came to Ghana. How many people in Ghana, the young people, know that just a little more than a decade ago, we had Yah Asantewa's funeral. Jerry Rollins brought her bones back home from the Seychelles. Santa Hene gave a massive funeral in Kumasi, and then Ajisu. What do we know about this great lady? and how she finally made it back home to Ghana, to Ashanti, and how she stood up and rallied the men of Ashanti to take on the might of the British Army. Those are the stories our children need to hear. These are the heroines and heroes they need to have.
Wow. It is my firm belief that if you are going to raise a lot of entrepreneurs who create wealth, opportunities for our people, employment, without the knowledge that you have shared with us, without this kind of knowledge, it will be very difficult.
But
if we don't have a lot,
we got to use the internet, because a lot of this information is on the internet. I have over 100 lectures on YouTube.
Yeah.
I didn't put any of them there. People just heard them and put them there, but they're there. And then you got Dr. Clark, you got Dr. Jeffries, you got Dr. Hilliard, you got Jacob Carruthers, you got Francis Welsing, you got Shashi McIntyre, you got Marimba Ani, the book called Yorugo. You got to get Yorugo by Dr. Marimba Ani. And Yorugo is, I think it's a Swahili term that means incomplete being. She's describing European culture, and she described them as being incomplete being. They lack the spiritual component that makes a human being human. Okay? That's enough?
Because without this knowledge, we won't be hopeful.
But I showed you that we didn't lose the knowledge. It's buried everywhere around Ghana. It's buried everywhere.
Right.
Let's study our festivals. The yam festivals isn't just about eating some yam that day. What is the yam festival of the Ewe really about? What is the Homowa really about? What is the Odrira really about? What is the Feshe really about? Study these festivals. Learn the history that goes with them. Then celebrate.
But if I go to school and I'm a Christian, I dissociate myself from this. Well, if I go to school,
any religion that is not propelled by the culture of the people that use them is a tool of genocide against them. And I hope that's said plainly enough to my brothers and sisters. Yes, Christianity has beauty in it, and that beauty came out of Africa, but you brought it in a European dish. Put it back in the African dish, and you'll get more nourishment and nutrients to grow you into the God-man and the God-woman that we need to be.
Hello?
Yes? Thank you, Professor Small and Kwabena. I like the response. Thank you, my brother, sisters.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, what is the question? Is there a question? Or have we lost each other? Can you hear me, Kwabena? Kwabena? Okay.
All right, so I think the network is giving us. Let's see if the professor will come back and we can wrap up. But we are so thankful to him for taking his time to educate us. Even have so much content, so much. Yes, he's back.
Okay. I didn't know what happened. I said, okay, the Queen must have got angry with me.
Yes, sir.
So I know it's time for me to go do some other work now, Brother Kwabena. But I've hoped we've had a good learning session that will be of value to anyone that heard us. You know,
it's true. So much value, so much value, and I will keep in touch.
Yes, sir.
And every now and then I'll connect.
Absolutely.
And anytime you have something you want to share with us, please don't hesitate to let me know. And anytime I feel there's something that we need to ask you, I will see if you're available.
Okay, my brother, and I will stay in touch with you. So Ghana,
yes, sir.
I love you because I love me, and I love me because I love divinity. You and I are God having a human experience called us. We're an expression, of an aspect of the divine.
Thank you. We also love you too.
Experience.
We love you again.
Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings.